All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We have just another minute and we'll get started. So thank you for being with us for this Westchester home buying seminar. And happy to have with me Cathy Devore, and we'll get started in just 1 or 2 more minutes. We're just going to let some more people join us. Thank you all for being here right on time. And we won't be much longer than 1, maybe 2 minutes. So thank you so much again for being with us for this Brownstoner webinar.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy. I've never done a webinar, but I've been a real estate agent for 25 years now. I'm in Lower Westchester. I'm based out of Larchmont. I've got two kids that live in Brooklyn, two kids that live in New York City. So I'm very familiar with the cycle of life of all of this. And Josh is going to, I guess, walk us through, some top of mind questions that all of you have. And basically, what I'm hoping to do is when I meet my clients, currently a lot of them are like, I wish I'd talked to you sooner. I wish I'd asked some of these questions because we've been driving around the suburbs trying to go to open houses, completely lost and completely confused. So I'm hoping I can just casually, if you're house curious, suburb curious, help you just figure out where to even start the process. I'm not trying to sell you a house today. I'm just literally pretend your sister's a real estate agent and you could ask her anything. That's kind of how I roll.
And again, my name is Josh Schneps. I'm the publisher of Brownstoner. I want to thank all of you for being here this afternoon and taking the time to be with Cathy and myself and learn more about Westchester. I, of course, want to thank our sponsor of Houlihan Lawrence. And I want to thank everybody for what will be a very informative session discussing everything you need to know about moving from New York City to Westchester. So, as we had mentioned earlier, I'm here with Houlihan Lawrence Real Estate salesperson Cathy Devore. And Cathy, why don't you just introduce yourself to everybody?
Well, like I was saying, I'm Cathy Devore. I've been doing this about 25 years. Before that, I worked in finance. I realized I like people. And so, despite being a real estate agent, my passion is actually solving the puzzle of each family, each person's destination, putting you in the right town, putting you in the right house for all of the right reasons, so that when you look back on the process, you don't have a lot of regrets or woulda, coulda, shouldas. Buying a house is expensive and selling a house is even more expensive. So you want to buy your first house and make it your last house. So
No,
that's
that's
what I
great,
do.
Cathy. Thank you. Well, why don't we talk about getting started? Because I think, sometimes that could be the toughest part for people. How can a home hunter get started? And can you give us an overview of the home buying process, particularly in Westchester?
Sure. Yeah. Normally I work with people for 6 to 24 months. Sometimes the people, their first year in the market, it takes them a little while to sort of get up and running and understand how things work. I kind of act as a quarterback for people, again, so that you're not just trying to figure it out on your own. I help dozens of families move every year. So normally you start with a phone call, just what are you looking for, commute, schools, lifestyle. And then we sort of pinpoint, like, what about New Jersey? What about Long Island? What about Westchester? I'm in Westchester. I work with people in, all of the surrounding communities. And then if you like what you hear, you pick a few towns. Maybe you meet with a realtor, maybe you're not ready, but you start exploring and you come out and you go apple picking and you go to lunch in the town and you ideally connect with a real estate agent and like see two houses. It's like trying on clothes. Like maybe they fit, maybe they don't. Also early in the process, it's not worth exploring towns that are not going to be your vibe price wise or people wise. So if you are looking at towns, it's like everyone would like to live on, Central Park West. Like, guess what? Like, I can't afford to live there. Probably a lot of you can't either. So I probably don't need to go to a lot of open houses on Central Park West where I can't afford to live. The suburbs are sort of the same way. Find suburbs if public schools are a priority. Make sure you're in good public schools. You can just save yourself a lot of those precious weekends by getting some information up first. And normally, I know people think realtors are crazy, we're stalkers, we're terrible. I promise you, I'm too busy to be any of those things. So just ask the innocent questions. I can give you an honest answer, point you in the right direction. And then when you're ready to take your next step, you reach out again. And I, again, just sort of like guide you in the right direction. So, In the beginning, it's about finding a lifestyle, and in the end, it's about finding a house.
All good things to share. Thank you. I want to just mention that if you have questions throughout this webinar, please feel free to click the chat button and pop some questions in there, and Kathy will do her best to answer them. Want to make sure that this is valuable to you. We're going to go over a lot of questions, but any questions you have, please feel free to pop it in the chat or the Q&A at the bottom of the Zoom here. Let's talk about the people that are probably on this webinar, people from New York City that are considering moving to Westchester. What would you say are some of the things that they should know about lifestyle, the community, amenities, and real estate values?
Well, one thing is a really easy cheat is the harder it is to get to the city, the lower the price of the house.
Makes
So
sense.
that is a very direct where it's very linear. So, if it's a half hour to Grand Central on the train direct, you're going to pay a premium. And if you're up county and you have to drive 15 minutes to a train station and the train's an hour, houses in suburbia, just very broadly speaking, if we were going to draw like a 1 hour radius of a commute, the least expensive houses you can get in like a North Stamford or a little bit further out in Jersey or Long Island start at around $600,000 for something that I like to say, if I wouldn't live in it, you wouldn't live in it. So, to have a house that's like not falling down and a complete disaster starts around 600 and it
Okay.
goes up from there. From a square foot basis, though, our prices are, depending where you live in Brooklyn, between you guys are like $1,500 a square foot if you're in like a Williamsburg or a Park Slope, and we're 750, so we are half of the square foot price. So I lost the question because I wasn't really paying attention.
Just some of the other things in
But
terms of Westchester that you would want people to know about the lifestyle or the community or
yeah.
amenities. I mean, obviously, it's such a big change from New York City. So, what are some of those things that potentially you could share?
Well, again, I've sort of touched on some of these, but your commute time, your actual, can you afford to live there, and how do you have an opinion about schools? From there, those are three big drivers for people. From there, I would say it's important to understand, like, is walkability a priority?
Mm.
Um, is there a community that you really identify with that you want to make sure is vibrant in that town? Like, make sure that that community is there. I would say those are honestly the biggies though are lifestyle, schools, commute, and house price.
Well, you talk about like walkability. I mean, what advice could you give people in terms of them being educated on the different communities? Westchester's a big county, and how do they find the right fit for them? What are some of the guidance that you can provide there?
Well, for example, I have a Westchester County map that shows all of the grade schools ratings of all the school districts, which is an easy cheat. And then I have a thing that shows the commute times for all of the different suburbs. And you start mixing and matching those together. But I think, Josh, you're leaning more towards like, what is the vibe? And you can do a little bit of online research, but again, it really goes back to people on the ground, talking to
Mm.
people, getting pointed in the right direction.
Yeah.
Um, where I live, I will oftentimes pull into my driveway after having done whatever I do in the morning and be like, oh, I'm not going to drive again until tomorrow. I'll throw my car in the garage. I live in a very walkable community called Mamaroneck, and I walk my dog. It's like I live in Brooklyn. I walk my dog to doggy daycare, and I walk my dog to the bodega to get an avocado, and I drive because I'm a real estate agent, so I drive people in circles all day showing them houses. But my actual lifestyle very much mimics being in the city, but I happen to have a big garden and a wraparound porch.
Yeah, beautiful. So I'm going to hit up a couple of these questions. There's a
Sure.
couple in the Q&A, and don't be shy. If you have questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A or the chat. The first question here is asking about down payments. What's the average down payment amount that's needed to purchase a home in Westchester?
To jump into the financing, there are some first-time home buyer programs and things. Basically, 3 to 5% is usually the minimum that you can put down. If you put down 20%, that means you don't have to get mortgage insurance, which is another few $100s a month. So if you can somehow get yourself to 20%, that is ideal. And if you're thinking about like, well, how much can I afford? A dirty cheat is the most you could afford is about 4 times your gross income. So if you make $200,000 a year and you have good credit and you don't have debt from school or whatever it's going to be, you could theoretically, four times 200,000, afford an $800,000 mortgage. So if that was going to be, assuming you're going to put 20% down, that would say that $1 million home purchase would be well within your boundaries. If you want to be more conservative, use three times your gross income. And
That's good guidance. Yeah.
yeah, and don't go online to like Zippity Do Mortgage and stuff. They're all teasers. They take your money, they pull you in, and then they don't deliver the loan that they promised. And they also don't do a great job of actually qualifying you. So I implore you also in talk to Chase Bank or talk to, a local well-known mortgage broker. And that's one of the unfun parts of the process. But you're going to have a lot more fun looking at houses when you know how the math works.
Yeah, for sure. So a question on Scarsdale. Can you talk
Yes.
a little bit in terms of your thoughts on Scarsdale and the market there?
Yes. Scarsdale is a very large market. And it is a very large school district. It is, of course, known basically across America as the number one school district in the country. And that goes back to like talking to someone locally on the streets. I Scarsdale has a reputation for having very aggressive academic standards and having a very aggressive academic student body. So if that rings like totally up your alley, then Scarsdale's a great fit. If you're looking for something that's a little bit more laid back, maybe you're concerned that you have sort of a average student, it might not be a great fit. And again, that's why sort of doing the phone calls with the local real estate agents or with me, I can sort of give you all the stereotypes. And the majority of the stereotypes about the different towns do exist for a reason. One thing I say is when you're driving around a town, look at the cars, look at what people are wearing. And if you're going into houses, look at how they furnish their houses. You can learn a lot about the values just by people's car choice
Interesting.
because
Yeah.
there's a lot of like cheats around to sort of get the vibe. But yeah, so Scarsdale is big, it's beautiful, it's got lots of pockets of downtowns, and it certainly offers basically absolutely everything. It's just, I would say before you move to Scarsdale, make sure that you're ready to, be in the big leagues academically.
Anything that you can give guidance on in terms of where people can find information about the schools?
I have a map that I can send you if I think you get my contact information. But I have a map that was generated from greatschools.org, and then obviously going to the individual schools' websites. There are very few empty towns in Westchester, so most people I think end up loving where they live. There are some towns that are known to be, I would say, private school towns. And so, like, I mean, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, I'll probably get fired. I might not be a realtor after this, I don't know. But like there's an area of of Yonkers that has a Bronxville post office, and people call it Bronkers because your mail says Bronxville, but it's Yonkers schools. So you go to private school, but it says you live in Bronxville. So
Yeah,
there's a
these are
lot of
all
that
things to
happening
know.
in
Yep.
Westchester.
There's a bunch more questions here.
I'm
We'll try
ready.
to get to all of them, and I'm going to take a couple more now, and then we'll take a couple more just a little bit later on. So please keep asking away. We'll try to get to all of them. A good question here is just what are some of the main reasons that people choose Westchester over other suburban areas like Long Island that have similar commute in schools in terms of quality?
I would say, as someone who lives in Westchester, we have a better commute. Sorry, we do. Much better commute. More trains, more predictable trains, no ferries in the mix, a lot less traffic in the mix. If you take that aside, I think for a lot of people, the other question you should ask yourself is where are grandma and grandpa, or where is my brother? And ironically, some people want to make sure that grandma and grandpa are not on the same side of the bridge. Some people want some family distance. Where is your family? Where are you trying to go to? So if your family's in Massachusetts and you were trying to see your parents or your sister, whoever it is, twice a month, you probably should live in Westchester so that you don't have to get off of Long Island. Conversely, if your family's in Virginia and you are fine with the New Jersey commute, you should probably live in New Jersey because. But then if you're a skier, kind of sucks to have to go over the GW or the Tappan Zee to get to the mountains. So, again, my job is to sort of have these phone calls, talk you through these things, and help you understand. But those are the two. There's great schools in New Jersey. There's great schools on Long Island. There's great schools that people think are bad schools that have great outcomes for lots of kids. It gets very subjective really pretty quickly.
So there's a couple of questions on here about the housing stock in general. I'm sure you're talking to people that may live in apartment buildings now. Is there anything that you can share about the diversity of housing stock in terms of beyond single family? Like, are there townhouses? Are there apartment buildings? Are there, other types of housing units?
Yes. Well, first of all, the realtors out in Westchester and Long Island and New Jersey, we do rentals, we do condos, we do co-ops, we do all of the above. And if you are a buyer, there are places that are known to be a great spot to live in an apartment. For example, like downtown White Plains, downtown New Rochelle. I believe it was the Wall Street Journal did a big article that New Rochelle is actually one of the few places in America, I believe, where rents haven't gone up because they've put up all these brand new super towers. It's literally a 30-minute commute to Grand Central. It has a
Mm.
great vibe downtown. Um, and then and it still feels walkable, bodega, get to the train. When you go north in Westchester, there are all sorts of sort of condominium, think you live on like Petunia Lane and Josh lives on Rose Lane, and they have a community center with a pool and that sort of stuff. That's going into like true suburbia. And then most of the local cities, certainly now, are having towers rise adjacent to the train stations. And those are many of them for rent and some of them are for sale. But with the interest rates and the way the building's gone recently, a lot of our new construction towers are for rent only. But basically, it all exists if you look for it.
That's great. A lot of other good questions are coming in, and please feel free to keep them coming. We're gonna do our best to get through all of them. I do have some other questions, so I want to ask a couple of mine because it might answer some of these questions too, and then we'll come back. So feel free to keep asking away questions that you have in that Q&A there. Thank you for participating and asking these questions. So I'll go back to one of my questions. Once a buyer's identified some communities they're interested in, how would you recommend they go about looking for a home?
Basically, again, following the blueprint that I'm sort of keep circling back to is figuring out your affordability, contacting a local real estate agent. Do not let your realtor be your real estate agent for all of Westchester or for all of everywhere. Realtors, especially with a thin inventory, I think I didn't answer that question. Inventory is extremely thin. Right now, people are holding off to the spring. I think we're going to have a year similar to 24 and 25, which is still down about 25% from our peaks, but will be
Wow.
a healthy season. Prices are going to remain high unless something changes. But once you figure out you're on your way here, then you should really be working with a realtor who knows the town. And again, we're not scary. Well, some of us are, but I'm not scary, and I can connect with people that hopefully are not scary. And people will come out and will literally like cheetah through three houses you're not going to buy because you're not ready to buy a house. And that's the big mistake you guys make. You say, I'm not going to call a realtor because I'm not ready to buy a house. I'm just going to go to the open houses and wait in line with 27 other people. It's a lot more efficient to create a relationship, get to know your real estate agent, because when the time comes to buy a house, if the market is doing what it's done the past 3 or 4 years, you're going to have to buy a house probably within a weekend. And so to meet a realtor on day one and then be told by me that, like, oh, you probably need to bid $35,000 over the asking price, you go home and you're like, Kathy's batshit crazy. And no. And then you don't get the house. So by looking at some houses and talking through, the outcomes that I predict are going to happen, what your priorities are, when the time comes to actually buy a house, you're actually ready. And
How
you
long do you typically find you're out there looking with people when people are serious, like that process?
Especially with the tougher inventory, ideally I get my new buyers in the fall because everyone theoretically would like to buy a house in the spring, move in over the summer, and be ready for school or fall and all zipped up. But sometimes people don't get a house their first season, so usually it's 6 to 24 months is how long I work with people.
So talk about specifically how much the homes range for in Westchester. It sounds like it's a wide range, but maybe some of the specifics around potential areas and the costs that are involved in that, from down payments you touched on to the insurance and fees and things of that nature.
Sure. Well, to use as an example, like a $1.5 million home, and you can scale all of this to any size home. I would say there are, well, the big things are the transfer tax in New York, which is 0.004%. And the mansion tax, because if you pay over $1 million, even though your house might be tiny, it is effectively a mansion as far as the tax tax guys are concerned. So that's 1%. And then from there, you're going to have title insurance, and you're going to have an attorney, and you're going to have an inspection, and like a whole bunch of bizarre fees that are all a few $100s that you seem to get charged for, like the banks and the notary and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Um, all of that for like a 1.5 house probably adds up to around $50,000 when you stack it all on top of each other. And then it goes back to that, like, are you putting down 3%? Are you putting down 20%? That's your down payment. And then the other sort of thing that sort of surprises people is when people pay their property taxes, sometimes they pay them in advance. So, like on January 1st, you pay the next 6 months of taxes. And then if you close on the house, the people have prepaid the taxes and you have to pay them back, and that can be, $5,000. And you're like, well, that sucked. But, that also is coming at you. And again, all of this is scalable, um, with the size of the house. Another thing to talk about is closing date for a house out in Westchester. We don't have a co-op board. You can't usually lock your mortgage rate for more than 60 days. So closings here are typically 45 to 90 days from when you all agree and sign a contract. And to go backwards from there, um, if you haven't a verbal accepted offer on a house on a Sunday, you should be expecting like a week from then to be under contract. It happens really quite quickly.
Any other buying tips that you give people or that they really should think about that are very different from New York City? I mean, I imagine that some of these houses are a little bit older. Some of them may have septic tanks. There might be like other things that I feel like people should consider that they wouldn't think of in New York City.
Yes, absolutely. And that Josh, that's a really good question. A huge one in 2025 is water.
Mm,
Water is strong, water is powerful, and it's hard to fix. So we are now doing a lot more looking at FEMA maps, understanding floodplains, understanding ways that you can waterproof your basement. And then there's also, as you look around Westchester, the different towns have different tax rates and what you get for that tax. So in some of the towns, we have city water and we have basically city gas lines. So it's just like your apartment, your heat comes from under the street and your water comes from under the street. And your, sanitary sewer stuff goes out to the street. So it feels like an apartment, but it's a house. When you go further up county, you're going to have a septic system and you're going to have well water, and it's just a whole different ball of wax. So coming from the city, that's just something to understand. And again, looking at when you move here, if we can just jump into like property taxes,
yeah,
our property taxes out in Westchester are a one-stop shop. So I know everyone says Westchester taxes are high. Westchester taxes run from the lowest town, which might be like a Rye, which is around 15 or $16,000 a year for $1 million house, to like a Scarsdale or a Pelham or a Bronxville, which are going to be like 31 to 33,000 per million. And when you think about it, that is between the 15,000 and the 30,000. That's over $1,000 a month. And those property taxes are considered when they look at your mortgage payment and what you can afford.
sure.
So it's not all apples to apples out here, but whatever tax and whatever place you land, that is the only tax. That is your school tax, that is your road tax, that's your libraries, your water. It's all baked into that tax. Whereas Connecticut, in Connecticut, the property taxes are lower, but then they have auxiliary taxes, and they tend to have more well water and more septic systems, and there's a car tax. And so, if there was actually a truly less expensive spot to live that had a good commute and great schools, we would all live there. Like I've
Sure.
crunched the numbers between the different towns, and like for example, a 4,000 square foot house in Greenwich right now costs about $4.5 million, and a 4,000 square foot house in like the Larchmont area costs about $3 million. So when you think about that $1.5 million spread between those two properties, if you buy the house in Larchmont, you have $1.5 million, which you can then put in the bank and say earn 4%. So now you're getting $60,000 in income. I know it's taxable. I don't go that deep a dive on these things, but that actually makes up for the tax difference in a pretty significant way. Um, and so again, basically, there's no workaround. You just have to pick how you want to pay because it all comes out the same way. And it's still so much cheaper than the city.
Yeah. I mean, I guess an extension of my question, answering maybe a couple of people's questions here in the Q&A is, you mentioned earlier that there's limited inventory. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of trends with pricing? Are pricing, do you think it's going to continue to go up? Is it going to pull back? How do you look at that way? And then when people are making bids, are they putting bids under? Are they putting bids at? Are they having to go over, ask? What are you finding in terms of that?
I like to call it Barbie Dream House. So if you're buying a Barbie Dream House, and everybody wants Barbie Dream House, it's so sparkly and there's like size 2 pants in the closet. Um, People go way over. Especially in the wealthier towns too. It seems like money begets more money. So as things get more expensive, people just throw more money at it. I would say 15 to 18% when things get really competitive is not unusual. So, $1 million house, the winning offer might be 1,180,000. It might be 1,205,000. It's an interesting thing psychologically to think about because if we get 12 offers and one person, I call it the jackass bids 1,205,000 and everybody else bid 1,1. Like, okay, but were you really going to pay 1,205,000? Because something to keep in mind is you're buying the house, you're not winning the house. So I would say that psychologically, the market psychology is not in line with where the winning bids are for most people. And so that goes back to why you really need to do your homework and really have conviction. And I call them small house victories. But I definitely, especially if it doesn't sell the first weekend, I love like a stinky house discount because like you know what, the moment the grandma moves out, you clean it, there's no smell anymore. If you can have a little vision that way, your money's going to go a lot further. Um, I call them grandma houses. I love grandma houses. But yes, if you want Barbie Dream House with a new kitchen and everything shiny, you will definitely be sort of competitively bidding against all of your Brooklyn neighbors. And when you move here and you go to the store, you're going to see actually the guy you saw on like the L train. Kind of weird. It's kind of creepy, but it's true.
What about people that are moving from the city that still own in the city? Can they, put an offer in with a contingency on selling their property in
Oh,
the city?
great question. No, there's no contingencies. Actually, now when you buy a house, a condo, as you said, I do sell condos and apartments and things, any of those. It basically stopped in the 80s. People realized that they could blow up their own credit and back out on a house.
Mm,
So it's a New York thing, we work around stuff. So ever since that workaround, sellers are very reluctant to take an offer that's contingent upon the sale of your other property because they probably are buying another property and their purchase is not contingent upon the sale of their property. So it's like a little basket of risk that no one's willing to hold the basket. That being said, it's pretty easy to line up your closing dates. Typically, the city end is the more difficult end than the suburban end. Should things not align exactly, there's something called a bridge loan, which your mortgage broker can get you,
mhm.
which makes your teeth hurt to think about. But if your co-op board drags you for that extra 60 days, you typically can get a bridge loan that would bridge that gap. That being said, another part of buying a house is the mortgage contingency. And we in Westchester in general, and again, these are general broad strokes, I would say 90% of my deals, there is no mortgage contingency, which means once you sign the contract and you put your 10%, which is standard, I know it's negotiable, but usually people put down 10%. You put your 10% down. If you cannot close on the house and buy the house, you forfeit your deposit,
Mhm.
which is super terrible. So I've never had that happen in 24 years, but that is the risk that you're taking. And baked into that mortgage contingency is also the appraisal. So in our markets, there's no if you buy a house for $1 million and the bank says it's only worth $900,000, they're only going to lend you X percentage of the $900,000, which means on top of your down payment, you now have to put down an additional $100,000 to purchase the home. So at that point, you want to like call rich Aunt Betty, you want to borrow against your 401k. Again, because you are ideally working with a reputable real estate person and a great mortgage broker, you should not get yourself in these pickles.
What about timing? Can you negotiate like the closing date? Can you have a certain expectation of when you have to close after signing a contract?
Yes, typically it's going to be 45 to 60 out to 90 days. And by New York State law, once the closing date is in the contract, both sides have 30 days to drag it. So if the contract says May 15th, both sides have the legal right to drag it to June 15th. But I am a big do unto others person. I always say, go in with your intents pure. And so if you think, if you say May 15th, but you really mean June 15th, oftentimes people will predate the contract by 30 days so that you cannot push it past the 30-day point. That being said, if someone did push it past the 30-day point, there isn't really a lot of, you can't just evict them from their house. So it's kind of a magic number that only exists psychologically and in legal terms because you'd
Hmm,
actually have to sue them. And that takes a really long time.
sure.
Again, in 24 years, I've only had this happen once when one of the sellers pretended to be dead or dying. No, he said he
Oh,
was
wow.
dying, so he couldn't move, but they never died. So I don't know. It was weird. That sort of stuff happens. It's real estate.
Yeah, I'm sure. Listen, it's life, right?
Yeah.
You touched on a whole bunch of like costs that are involved in owning a home. Are there any other costs that people should keep in mind? I mean, how much does it cost your heating bill? I mean, when you live in an apartment, things like that probably aren't such a big deal. But I assume once you move into a larger space, which I'm sure is a big part of people moving to the suburbs, like what could they expect, or what are other things that maybe we're not thinking about as New York City residents?
In recent times, our utility costs, as I'm sure you've seen in the news, all of our utility costs have gone up extensively. I would say for a house, I would say for your heating, your cooling, your heat, your air conditioning, and your cooking gas, your bill's gonna run. If your bill's 500, like that's exciting. That's super exciting. If you're lucky, me and your bill's 1,500, because apparently I want to live in like a spa and then an ice box. It is what it is. But you make your own choices there. And but it is a hidden cost that people don't expect. Gardener, not so bad for what I call the mow and blow. They mow your lawn and they blow your leaves off. That's it. That's all you get. No flower planting and stuff. It's like 150 to 250 unless you live, in some huge place, but generally not bad. You can also get an electric mower, do it yourself. It's not that hard. And then you have your cable internet Wi-Fi, which is evolving as we speak because everybody's going offline and
Yeah,
streaming. So
all
that's
things to
most
keep
of
in
them.
mind for
Yeah,
sure.
definitely.
Just hopping into the Q&A again, a good one here is what is the best advice for first-time home buyers? People that don't own in New York City that might be looking to buy in Westchester.
I would say the best advice, because so much of our market is about hyping you guys up, is take a deep breath. Like it shouldn't be scary. It shouldn't be terrible. If you have someone walking you through the process, um, it shouldn't feel like you're just getting like hit in the face repeatedly, which is seemingly like what a lot of people feel like right now. Um, and it should be fun. It's your weekend. You're supposed to come out, you're supposed to have fun, you know, it, it just try. I know it's hard because you want your first house for whatever the reasons are. But everyone gets their first house, everyone's first house, just like your spouse. You can't pick houses and spouses for other people, but you end up in the right spot. So you sort of have to trust the process and be a little zen, which doesn't feel great. Um, and don't back yourself into a corner. Like, a rookie mistake is to tell your landlord, like, you know, now that you're definitely moving out March 31st because you're buying a house, like, bad plan. Bad plan, bad plan. That being said, I know of short-term housing. We do have corporate rentals, which are low-key awful, but they're fine. But don't box yourself. Don't put yourself so that you have to buy something because you want to buy something you love. And again, you want it to be fun. So the only one really putting pressure on you is you.
What do you think is like the most challenging part? I mean, you're talking about some things that that could be challenging, but is there anything to set expectations of what could be the most challenging part of this whole buying a home and moving to Westchester?
I think I think the most challenging thing is in the beginning it's such a wide range of possibility that it's crippling. And a lot of people just suffer from sort of deer in the headlights syndrome because they don't know where to start, they don't know where to go. Do they want to be in Long Island? Do they want a big house? And actually you if you're moving with a partner, you learn a lot about your partner because it's amazing when you start walking into spaces how all of a sudden your priorities shift. And I say to my clients, you know, it's evolution here, not revolution. Slowly, as you look, you're going to realize like one of my clients had this massive photograph of Prince, formerly known as whatever his name is, the singer guy, and they had a massive Prince thing. And eventually, before they came out of the city, I would measure to see if Prince would fit on the wall because it's not worth them driving out of Manhattan with like screaming children to be told Prince didn't fit. So eventually, your realtor will learn your priorities. And again, we're here to save you time and, take out some of the guesswork. There's broker open houses during the week. We will all see all the houses in our market and, the stuff that's not, they don't show you what they don't want you to see, right? So if the yard is terrible, they're not going to have a picture of the yard. If the powder room is terrible, like there's no photos. So I can FaceTime you, I can send you photos. I can sort of do like a fact check before you get the zip car or, take the train. And again, it's just I get that it's an overwhelming process, but
That's all great. No, that's terrific. It's funny. People sometimes the home is the biggest investment they'll ever make, ever.
pick
And
me.
then they look for like the cheapest attorney, to go over the contract of the biggest investment ever. And there's a question here that I think, it just brings up the point of investing in yourself is someone just asking, would you get a better price if you use a seller's broker? So I think maybe talking
Oh,
about how
that is the
important that
worst.
is
Okay,
just
no,
to be
no, no, no.
represented.
No, you want your own buyer's broker. And as realtors, we go all through all this in school. You can be a buyer's agent or you can be a seller's agent. So when I list the yellow house, I am employed by Jack and Jill who live in the yellow house. I owe all my fiduciary duties and all that stuff to Jack and Jill. When you walk into the open house and you say, wink, wink, what if I buy the house? You're going to make more money. Wink, wink. If I'm like, oh, this sounds like a great plan, let me screw everybody else. Like, isn't that a little bit of telling my character right there? Like, now do you trust me? Because I just showed you that I was willing to screw over Jack and Jill and all the other people at the open house so that I can make, quote, a little more money. Who's going to say, oh, by the way, this area is known to flood? Because I can't say that because I've been hired by Jack and Jill and I can be sued if I tell you the area might flood because that's not in Jack and Jill's best interest, and I represent them. So conversely, if you're working with a buyer's agent who is not representing Jack and Jill, I say, guys, like I drive by here all the time and people are like in friggin' canoes. Like this area floods. So you can't, that is the wrong, again, I think it's a big psychological tell if the broker's like, yeah, I'll cut corners for you. She doesn't even know you. Bad plan.
Thank you. What would you say to people that are thinking about maybe renting first, saying, let me see how it is to live there, try the area out. What's your thought process on that?
Depending on your family structure and size and how many pets you have and all of those variables, the less complicated your family structure and size is, the more realistic renting is. And again, it's also your personal tolerance for upheaval. So you're going to leave the city, you're going to rent. And again, this is most rentals want a minimum of a year, and most rentals are unfurnished. So let's start with that fact. So in a perfect world, you rent, you line up your close date the next summer. But if you don't like it, now and you want to move like one school district over, like if you have kids in the schools, it gets very disruptive. I think the ultimate thing is for most people, you should just, you know yourself. If you're really that person that might not like it, you should definitely rent, because selling your house is really expensive. Selling your house is going to cost you, easily 8% of the price of your house, because there's a 5% brokerage fee, there's a 1% sales tax, there's like, all of this white noise. So in $1 million home, it'll cost you $80,000 to move out. And especially now, transacting at what have been historical highs, I wouldn't want to gamble that in 2 years, when you decide you don't like it, that the market has just lifted your house by 8%. That being said, again, it's all very personal decision.
Sure.
But if you have 3 kids and a 100-pound dog, like some people I know, um, it's hard to get a rental because people don't want your 100-pound dog. So are you willing to get rid of your dog? Are you willing to put your kids in schools and then switch them out of the schools? It's just it adds a ripple of disruption. But again, a smaller ripple than buying a house that you don't like and moving back to the city.
So Kathy, we're going to give out your contact information. We'll be emailing everybody, and this video will be available should anybody want to review it again. But could you give your best contact information? And then also, if there are any other last questions that you want to pop in there, I think we got to most of them here. But I guess while Kathy, you give your information, we can see if anybody else has any other questions to put in the Q&A.
Sure. I think text is usually the easiest, and that's 914-671-1111. That's my cell phone. I think you'll probably get emailed that. You can also email me. That's too long to spell on the Zoom call. Um, or just Cathy Devore on Instagram. You could DM me there. And again, I promise I'm not a stalker. And if you want to have like a more candid chat that's specific to you, that's what I would recommend, is we just do this chat and we can have a glass of coffee, we can have a glass of wine, whatever it is, and just sort of chat through your situation. That's what I enjoy doing. It's just getting you going in the right direction.
Yeah, I think we had touched on, there was a question here about, the best schools, researching areas. I mean, I imagine that that's part of a process that you're going to support people with too.
Oh, 100%. And again, all of these things, do you want to be on the baccalaureate system because you might be moving back to Europe? If so, you want a school district that has the baccalaureate degree, which would be like a Rye or a Rybrook or a Harrison. These are, yes, I work with people just trying to take that huge cloud of everything and sort of narrow it down to what are they looking for and get them going in the right direction. And
Give that phone number again, Kathy,
that's
please.
914-671-1111. A lot of ones. A lot of little kids dial me when they're,
That's good. You're lucky you have that number.
yeah.
We'll make sure also that if you registered for this webinar, we will be sending out the video as well as Kathy's contact information as well. But I think, listen, that's why she's here. She wants to be helpful to your buying process. So anyone that has further questions, definitely reach out to Kathy directly. And Kathy, I want to thank you so much and Houlihan Lawrence for being here and giving of your time and your knowledge.
Well, thanks, Josh. And again, guys, I mean, pretend I'm like your sister in real estate. We can have a casual chat and get going in the right direction. So enjoy your afternoon, everyone.
Thanks again, Kathy. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a great afternoon. Take care.